Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Welcome to everyone if you're listening on YouTube or on the digital networks. Remember, you can find us on YouTube if you just search for Truth Sentinel with Scott. There's two channels there, Truth Sentinel and Truth Sentinel 2. Truth Sentinel 2 is actually where we upload most of the videos. You can also find us at www.truthsentinel.co.uk. There's a chat room there, and there's also a voicemail system. You can leave us some messages. We cover a variety of topics, as you'll see from our playlist. And today we're going to be doing one of our chat discussion shows where we talk about news articles. A lot's been happening in the news lately. I mean, more recently, the big Brexit situation with the UK leaving the EU. Lots of people panicking and thinking terrible things are going to happen. I'm not so sure. I think we need to wait and find out what's going to happen. And in fact, I'm not even convinced that we're going to leave the EU. I know we voted for it, and moves will be taken very shortly to set the process in motion. But I don't think this is what the elite wanted to happen. And I think they can find ways to make sure something happens so that we don't leave the EU. I don't know, just a hunch anyway. I might be wrong. What do you think anyway? What do you think is going to happen? What are the repercussions of this? So much to take in at the moment, so maybe we'll talk about that later. Today we're going to be chatting to Phil from Portugal, Seth from the USA, Anthony K from Kazakhstan, and I'm here in Thailand, so a very cross-cultural experience. In the first part, we're going to talk about the Orlando shootings. Just a bit of an intro. We're actually going to do a whole episode on that coming up soon. So first, Seth is going to join us, and then he'll be leaving us, and we'll just chat to Anthony and Phil. Let's go over to Seth now. Seth, there's big news from the US at the moment with the Orlando shooting. Can you just give us a little bit of background on what happened?
Absolutely. We could go into this for a really long amount of time. I'm going to try and condense it down to as little as humanly possible. There's a massacre at Florida nightclub, which is known as Club Pulse, kills 50, and allegedly it hospitalized 53 during this. Supposedly, there was a shooting in Florida, in Orlando, at this nightclub. And the single shooter, which the media narrative has changed constantly on this thing. It has gone from right at the very beginning, right when the very first details were coming out, you had a lot of the what you would refer to as left-wing media pundits and whatnot referred to this individual as connected with a right-wing white anti-gay hate group. And then the right-wing, quote-unquote, media pundits here in the United States had reported this as an ISIS-inspired shooting and something connected to Islam. And granted, both narratives have essentially kind of fallen a little bit apart, but it continues onward and everybody wants to push what they want to push there. Supposedly in about 7 minutes, this guy shot with an AR-15 103 people and used about like 1,000 rounds of ammunition, allegedly, because some of the people were shot, most of them were shot multiple times, some up to 12 times, and there were supposedly rounds fired in the air indiscriminately to get people afraid to move this way or the other. Then there was about a 3-hour break in between the massacre and the police standoff with this guy that the cops described as a hail of bullets from one individual there, which really leads one to wonder, how the hell does this guy have so much ammunition that he could carry on his person at any one time there and still be able to reload that much ammunition in under 7 minutes? It does kind of boggle the mind and leads to a whole lot of inconsistencies within this. I mean, everything from the anti-gay thing that's come out to be proven to be pretty false there is the fact that this guy was gay, was a regular at Club Pulse, had a boyfriend, and it doesn't add up quite with the way that they have there. They've tried the Muslim sort of a thing. His narrative has really fallen flat with all the different media, especially right-wing groups, trying to promote that this was a Muslim-inspired shooting, considering that this guy has claimed to be connected to multiple antithetical Muslim groups to one another, claiming to be connected to both Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda, which, as your audience I'm sure is aware, are both a respectively Shiite and Sunni group, and which are literally at war with one another. But of course, again, the average American here doesn't understand any of this. But if this guy's allegedly a Muslim, why would he not understand this? There's the nuance of his father allegedly being connected to the Taliban, but his father also being a CIA asset and working for the CIA. The fact that this guy that allegedly did the shooting, Omar Mateen is his name, I believe, worked for Jupiter Security Company, which has been connected to other mass shootings as well, also known as G4, I believe it's G4S. I believe is the name that they use there, colloquialism.
That's a British company, I believe, as well.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that
And
interesting?
it is, and I think the biggest point to definitely ask questions about is the ammunition. I mean, this guy is supposed to be, firing continuously. He would need a big bag of ammunition. How do you just walk into a club and get with that amount of ammunition? I mean, it's hard enough to get into a club in some places, if you're not wearing the right shoes or anything. But to walk in there with a machine gun and all this ammunition, it definitely throws up some questions.
He didn't shoot his way in, as far as I understand. He was in the club,
Mm-hmm.
or at least according to the official narrative, he was in the club earlier. So that, I mean, that would be one way around it, is to just shoot your way in. But that's apparently not what happened. So yeah, the question stands: how do you get in there with at least 1,000 rounds of ammunition? How do you physically carry that in? I mean, we're talking about, the equivalent of 2 suits of chainmail. I mean,
Exactly.
But
So
yeah, how do you get around security? And it's very
What
strange.
I'd just been reading on a very new Wikipedia article was that he arrived at the club at about 2 a.m. and he was approached by a uniformed police officer before he actually got in. The interesting thing for me was about the gun and the ammunition. You hear people saying that he fired off very rapid fire rounds, but here it's saying in this article, it's saying that he came in with an SIG Sauer semi-automatic rifle. It's not a machine gun. It either fires 1 round each time you press the trigger, or it fires a couple of rounds each time you press the trigger. So it's a bit of a strange, like you say, Seth, there's loads of inconsistencies here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a typical inconsistency with these stories as well. They often seem to change it into one of these machine guns. When I think there was mention of a handgun as well. He's supposed to have had a handgun and this
And this
machine
semi-automatic.
rifle. Yeah, semi-automatic.
Which again makes no sense with the amount of ammunition supposedly fired. And just to wrap it up here a little bit, the narrative of how people have run with it. I mean, we've gotten to see the worst aspects here in the United States of just about every possible group as they try and latch onto this issue, supposing that this actually happened, that this is indeed everything of the official narrative is true and everything, that people have run with this in one of a ton of different directions depending on their own political affiliation and biases, which will tie into statistics later and everything. But even to the disgusting level of this stuff, going into Sacramento here, this is CBS Local. Sacramento Baptist preacher praises Orlando gay nightclub attack, saying that if the country were run by God-fearing people, they would have lined up all those guys firing line style and shot them in the head anyways. And it's absolutely disgusting. We could see the right-wing type guys run with the anti-gay or anti-Muslim narrative. We could see the left-wing run with the disarm everybody by taking all the guns narrative. And it never really stops. None of these people actually give, if indeed, 50 people or 49 people? They keep changing the numbers there from 49 to 50 back to 49 as far as the people killed. I don't understand, as we talked about before, how somebody gets unkilled. But that's a very interesting fact there that I don't really think any of the pundits, even if this did happen the way they said it happened, give a crap about the people that allegedly died there or that were injured there at all. Because everybody just already had their own preconceived narrative to run with.
Yeah, and especially with some of the language used around the numbers. Like I found one article, this was posted on June the 12th on Mediaite.com, and it says that the title is 50 dead, many injured in Orlando nightclub shooting. And then it runs with a gunman opened fire inside an Orlando nightclub last night and killed roughly 20 people. Police are saying roughly 40 were injured. How does that add up? It doesn't even add up with the title of the article.
Exactly.
And then when you use a word like roughly, you killed roughly 20 people. Like, what does that mean?
We're going to continue our chats about world news over the last few months with just Anthony and Phil now. So first of all, I thought I'd just mention some of the stories briefly that I just saw in the news today. The stories of Obama visiting Hiroshima. He said that he hoped nuclear weapons will be disposed of in the future. And I thought to myself, well, if ever there was a time to do something about nuclear weapons, it's when you become president. So I found that a bit of a lame statement, saying he hopes nuclear weapons will be disposed of in the future. Because actually in his presidential campaign, he said he was going to do something about it. So I'm not happy with Obama on that cause anyway.
Did he actually do anything about it?
No, he hasn't. In fact, in his tenure as president, I think the stockpile hasn't decreased, it's increased. He's done nothing apart from be the first US president to visit Hiroshima.
That's unbelievable, isn't it, though, that he's the first president to visit Hiroshima?
It's unbelievable. He's also the first president to visit Cuba. But I do think it's more of a sort of photo opportunity to him. So his idea of doing something about it is just to go and visit Hiroshima.
Sure, yeah. There's a reason why former presidents haven't visited Cuba. With Hiroshima, you would think, like, for it to have taken that long for anyone to care enough to send the president, that's quite shameful.
Well, I think it's seen as a bit unpatriotic and almost as an apology by some, like, to go and visit Hiroshima. That just shows you how ridiculous things are, and how slow things move. This is considered progress after so many years that the president has actually visited the place where the bomb was dropped. For me, that's not good enough. He's president. He can do something about it. He can take the first steps, and he hasn't done anything as far as I'm concerned. But moving on to something a little bit more light-hearted, and by that I mean extremely painful. Here in Thailand, a guy was sitting on the loo and a snake came up and bit him on his sensitive regions, and he had to wrestle with it for about 30 minutes. That kind of stuck in my memory. I don't know why. I doubt if you guys have much to say about that.
Well, having someone wrestle a snake with his tender bits it brings up quite a few images, really.
Yeah, it does. I saw some photos. It was very painful, but the guy has recovered, and I think he's kind of joking about it himself now. So that is good news, anyway. Okay, never mind.
What can I possibly add to that would be kind of bizarre than the story itself?
So a slightly more serious story: the migrants that have drowned off the coast of Libya. I believe it's about 700. And I was just thinking, the article talks about the migrants, and I think that label kind of dehumanizes people a little bit, don't you think? If it was like 700 business executives, there would be uproar around the world. But just by saying migrants, I think people have become so used to migrants drowning that 700 drowning in the space of 2 days, I just don't think most people give it a second look. But that's huge.
It is absolutely huge, and I think an even better label would be if they'd broken it into families. So instead of 700 migrants, if they'd said, I don't know, 250 families, then that would be. You're right. The term does tend to dehumanize a little. Yeah, I agree.
Also, I think it's strange how media works. Like there was that some time ago, there was that photo of the child lying face down on the beach that had drowned, and that causes an international outcry. But if you say 700 migrants drowned, I'm sure amongst that there's probably small children as well. But there's no image, and I think people just skip past it, and there won't be much talk about that again. But one image can be so powerful.
This is one of the dangers of sort of global media, global news reporting, really. I was on the internet not long before we started this chat, and there was a Brazilian girl who'd posted a video on it. She was from Rio de Janeiro, which is where they're going to have the next Olympic Games. And she was saying, like, isn't it great that we're going to have the next Olympic Games here? All the news is talking about this. But it's strange because last night, one 7-year-old girl was raped by 30 men, and it hasn't been put on the news at all. Isn't that strange? And her video was kind of going on like that, and I kind of thought that's horrific. 30 men raping a 7-year-old girl, and yet the big news is that Rio de Janeiro, where the girl was raped, is going to be holding the next Olympic Games. So that's the news. That's what's kind of sticks in people's mind. And it's not so long ago that we had the Paris bombings, and they didn't kill anywhere near to 700 people, is it? And yet, because it has that sort of label of terrorism, it gets kind of shunted to the top of importance.
It is curious. I guess it's the news editors that decide what goes into the news, and it's curious as to what their formula is for choosing what makes the story. Because there is sort of less than 10 main news outlets that kind of control all the other news outlets. So whoever does control them has a pretty powerful effect on what people see and hear in the news.
Absolutely agree. And I'm not even sure it's a question of controlling so much as news organizations, because of the 24-hour news cycle, and look, this has been said before, but because of the 24-hour news cycle, they are desperate for news. So if Reuters puts something out, like hundreds of agencies are going to take it and pay Reuters for it, just because they need something to fill their news. That's why the advertising industry has turned so much towards trying to get free content into news programs. And sometimes when you're watching the news, you feel like the boundaries between the programming and the ads are kind of blurring slightly. And it's because they need stuff. If some PR company goes out and produces something that looks superficially like a news story, but it's actually a spruik for a product, it's very likely that a lot of networks will take it up.
And don't you guys think as well that along with kind of trying to control the media, the news that gets out, they're looking for a sort of shock factor. So there's a big sort of human psychological aspect to this as well. You know, people do get sick of hearing about lots of people dying or lots of wars going on or whatever. So, and possibly part of that is because of the way advertising is transferred to us. You know, it's looking for some kind of shock factor that makes the emotions jump, that gives people some sort of feeling. And when you have so many adverts out there and you're bombarded with so many things that are designed to shock, designed to kind of to push your buttons, to push your emotional buttons. It's like we get emotional override or something where we become numb, to more news things that are thrown at us.
Are you saying, Phil, that the bombardment of people nowadays with commercial messages, bearing in mind the average American child sees 5,000 commercial messages per day and the average Australian child sees about 3,000, are you saying that the bombardment of people with commercial messages that are meant to kind of pique their attention is actually having the effect of making it difficult to pique people's attention with real information?
I would have liked to have said that, but you said it so much better than me, Anthony. So yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Wow.
If you think about it as well, you know, if you were living in a small village like 30 or 40 years ago on the coast of Libya, and you suddenly found out that 700 people or 250 families or whatever died from drowning, it would have been a shock story. It would have been horrifying. And yet, for the rest of the world, you know, when we hear that kind of story, it's a horrible story, but when you place it in amongst all of the other stuff that's going on, all of the other stuff that we're bombarded with, it becomes difficult to feel a real sense of empathy, a real sense of compassion, and to really go deeply into that particular news story, because there's so many other things going on. There's 1,000 people dying from some kind of disease over in Central Africa. There's swathes of the rainforest being cut away in South America, and tribes losing their homelands, and tribal peoples dying, and so on. You know, we get all of these negative stories, and in amongst, they're just sort of little stories in amongst, you know, the thousands of images, like you said, you know, 3 to 5,000 images being sent at us all the time, every day. It's quite difficult to pull one thing aside, one piece of news aside, and enter it in an empathetic and compassionate sort of way, and really feel something. That's my take on it.
I would have to agree. Yeah.
Moving on, another story that, just a brief story, was a boy fell into a gorilla enclosure in Cincinnati, I believe. And basically, the gorilla sort of played around with the boy. Some stories report that he was kind of shaking him quite violently. I actually saw a brief video of the incident, and the gorilla was just prodding the boy gently and just sort of pulling him onto his feet. But anyway, they ended up shooting the gorilla, which is an endangered species, and there's a lot of people in uproar today saying he shouldn't have been shot. I wondered what you think, whether he should have been shot or he shouldn't. I mean, the gorilla was huge. I mean, he could quite easily have killed that kid quite quickly. I think for me, it depends on whether that story's true about him violently shaking the kid, because what I saw was him just being quite gently poking the boy. But I wondered what you guys thought, whether he should have been shot or not.
For me, I've seen a similar story many years ago, in fact, and it might have been in the UK, where a young toddler fell into the gorilla enclosure, and there was a silverback there, and the silverback kind of protected him. The toddler was knocked out and wasn't moving, and the silverback kind of picked him up very, very gently and took him over to where he was sitting, and kind of looked after him, nursed him for a little while until the gorilla handlers or whatever could go in and retrieve the toddler. So, and when I sort of saw the video on that, I was really moved by it and really thought, I'm surprised that they ended up shooting a gorilla in this instance, basically.
Yeah, it is a bit of a shame.
It is a tough issue. It's a tough decision to make, I think, because, I mean, on one side of the argument, you'd have to say, well, this could happen again. But on the other side of the argument, if there's a toddler falling into an enclosure, then I imagine that possibly the blame for that comes with the people who designed the enclosure, not with the animal. I mean, they are enclosed because they are wild animals, right? So... And we can't always expect wild animals to be gentle.
I think some people are blaming the family as well, saying that, you know, this child had to crawl under 2 fences apparently, so it wasn't easy to get into this area. I think he was 3 years old, and they're saying that, you know, he shouldn't have been left unattended and shouldn't have been given the opportunity. So everyone's pointing blame at different people over this story.
Yeah. I think it's a tough one to comment on without knowing all of the facts, and possibly even if you do know all of the facts.
Another young boy was left in the woods as a punishment by his Japanese parents. I looked into the story a bit more. He wasn't like literally taken out to the woods as a punishment and left there. They were in the woods. He did something wrong, so they left him and walked about 500 meters away to sort of isolate him, probably to make him think that they were going to leave him. But then they actually have lost him, and he's been missing for 2 days. I thought that was a bit sad. I hope they do find the boy, because I'm sure they'll feel really, really bad after that if they can't find him now.
Yeah, that's horrendous, you know, because I remember my dad doing a similar thing to me. We were on a car journey, and I was being like just a horrible, horrible little monster in the back seat. And he said, "All right, well, you're out." And you know, like, I got out of the car and he drove off. And he only drove a few hundred meters, you know, and then kind of stopped.
Did you ever see him again?
20 years later, it was just, you know, like kind of a little, you know, you're going to learn a bit of a lesson here about the fact that there are boundaries. And I think he was, you know, it was a memorable punishment, and I don't see anything wrong with what he did. But had I somehow managed to get lost, I don't think he ever would have forgiven himself. So I feel quite bad for the parents there, because it sounds risky, but it doesn't sound excessively risky. I think it's more a case of incredibly bad luck.
Yeah, I think people are very quick to jump on the parents in these kind of stories to sort of chastise them, you know. But I think if they are loving parents, and there's, you know, just because of what's happened here, I think there's a lot of parents that might have done something similar, but it hasn't turned out like this. I think if it does turn out they can't find him, then I feel sorry for the parents. Another story: senior Saudi cleric has banned people from taking selfies with cats, and says taking photos in general is prohibited. It does seem like they're banning everything in Saudi. I mean, there's already severe restrictions on movies and music in Saudi. And earlier this year, Saudi Arabia's Grand Mufti issued a fatwa declaring that chess was forbidden in Islam as well. And it does seem to me these people are really, really out of touch with the modern world. I think that's part of the problem. I mean, he actually says the reason he bans chess was because it brings enmity and hatred between its contestants, and because it encourages gambling and is a waste of time and finances. But I don't think gambling's a big issue in chess. I really don't. So it sounds to me like a lot of these things and possibly with this selfie issue, he actually had to ask what selfies were. And someone explained it to him, and he said, "What?" You know, it was news to him. So he obviously hasn't got a clue about the whole, internet thing and, selfies. And I actually hate selfies. And if you were going to ban anything in the world, then I would probably start with selfies as well. But I am kind of against banning things in general. But these people are so out of touch, these clerics.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, he made this ruling in response to a question during, I think it was some kind of televised question and answer session.
That's right.
And an audience member brought up this idea. What do you think of? Brought up the whole idea of, what do you think of selfies? And as you said, he was like, what? And then they explained, people take photographs with their cats and put them on the internet, and he had to kind of come up with a viewpoint on that, off the top of his head, and his kind of reflexive viewpoint was, oh, it sounds a bit Western. Let's ban it, Just, oh my God.
Yeah, he said people should not take photos with cats, dogs, or wolves, or just anything, basically.
Yeah.
This idea of chess, like encouraging enmity and what was it, hatred?
That's right.
Of your opponent. Like, As though the Saudis don't do enough that encourage enmity and hatred, like chopping people's hands off when they steal, or having the death sentence, and torturing people,
or banning things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that always involves an element of like condemnation of people who do those things, which of course encourages, what do you say, enmity and hatred. So, yeah, no, it's a messed up worldview in a big way.
Talking of messed up worldviews, another cleric in Pakistan, or at least the head of a powerful Islamic council, they're refusing to back down from a proposal that makes it legal for husbands to lightly beat their wives if they've done something wrong. And something wrong could be something like not wearing the clothes they've been told to wear, those kind of things. And apparently it's only light beating, so you can beat them with a handkerchief, a hat, or a turban, but they advise not to hit her in the face or private parts.
I'd like to see a ruling where the wives are actually allowed to get together and beat the husbands. They do something wrong.
I hope they televise that if they do. It does seem ridiculous again. I just think these clerics, this is all linked to religion, of course, and I just think if you're going to have a religion and you believe in a god, well, surely laws and rules come from that god. I mean, if you start putting control into the hands of humans, you're going to end up with these ridiculous situations. Most of these clerics are kind of old men who are so out of touch, and they haven't moved with the times. And I wondered whether you think that people will gradually start to see these clerics as just slightly ridiculous and stop listening to them.
I'm hoping. That's what I was thinking when you said about the Saudi cleric and or the Mufti, the Grand Mufti, and what he was proposing, because it sort of made me think. Obviously, there's a proportion of the population who are adopting what they would call kind of Western characteristics and ideas, and basically it's not necessarily Western. It's just kind of joining the world, really. It's just sort of adopting new technologies and new ideas, new ways of living, and new things to do, with your own time. Obviously, a lot of people want to do that, and so if they hear ridiculous things like this coming from someone that they previously respected as like a religious leader, a spiritual leader, it's going to sort of put that. I think in the end, if enough people will sort of see that the ridiculousness of that, the insanity of trying to pass laws and rules and things that just make no sense.
Plus, it's so selective. I mean, let's see the Saudis ban like sunglasses, gold-plated briefcases, and Rolex watches. Then we'll know they're getting serious about it. They're not going to ban any of those things any more than they're going to ban like the fast cars that they all run around crashing into each other with in Riyadh. Like it's just not going to happen. So it's clearly not a consistent ideology. It's just a kind of make it up as you go reactionary form of nonsense, really.
It is. It's sheer lunacy. And talking of things lunar or moon related, Phil, you wanted to talk about something we've touched on before, moon bases.
Just want to stop you there and say, Scott, you win the Segway of the Month award.
I'm trying to get points for every Segway, so we should have some award ceremony at the end of the year, I think.
Well earned nonetheless.
Thank you.
I've forgotten what I was going to talk about.
Oh, damn.
Moonbase?
Yes. So I understand you guys had a chat about colonizing Mars a month ago, maybe a few weeks ago. And this article I saw on Astrobiology Group, and they have a website, but this was about the European Space Agency willing to invite space discovery groups to build an international colony on the moon. And I looked at the video that they posted there, and it was really impressive, actually. I don't know exactly what I sort of think about this, so I was going to sort of pose a question after I speak about it a bit. But basically, the video showed a series of images that kind of led up to the establishment of a lunar base, and a rocket would take off from Earth carrying a lunar lander which would head to Shackleton's crater. The lander would contain an inflatable dome and 2 robot 3D printers. The dome would be unloaded and inflated to provide a kind of support structure to these inhabitable domes, I guess. The robots would then collect moon dust from the surface, and they showed a video of this actually happening. I really thought this was quite cool technology, basically. They would collect moon dust through a kind of vacuum cleaner type thing slung on the back of the robot. And then out of the front of it, the moon dust would go through some sort of process inside the robot, and out of the front of the robot, it would kind of build up these layers of moon dust plus whatever kind of chemicals would stick everything together to provide this very, very strong but lightweight dome, which would protect the inhabitants from meteorites and all the other kind of radiation and all the other kind of dangers of living on the moon, I guess. And the actual shell of the dome was based on a kind of, it was like a cellular structure. It takes about 3 months to create the shell, and it's kind of hollow inside, or at least it has lots of little hollows, very much like a bird's bone. So very lightweight, but very, very strong. So a bird's bone on a microscopic level, I should say. So light and very strong and capable of withstanding all of these dangers like meteors and radiation. And the lunar lander's capsule is then used as an airlock, and the whole structure would house about 4 people. And that would be like just one structure amongst many. So it was very cool to sort of see this technology sort of put into a video format and see how the base would actually be created. But my question to you guys, I guess, is would the money that they'd spend on this, which would be billions, would the money be better spent on kind of earthbound problems that we have at the moment?
I'd like to make a comment. First of all, I saw them testing inflatable houses, inflatable domes this week out in space. So it looks like the inflatable houses work anyway. And I wonder why they're not going to use those rather than building these other ones. Second, in relation to your question, I think I'm totally for these kind of missions because I think a lot of technology does come from sort of moon missions and space projects and even military projects as well. So in some ways they're a catalyst for making technology and things that can be used on Earth. But there is a severe problem with housing on planet Earth, and so they should be also trying to maybe simultaneously sort out some of the problems on Earth as well and use some of this technology to create cheap homes for people on Earth, basically. I know for most people in my country, in the UK, growing up now, there's not a hope in hell of buying a house, but most people would be quite interested in a small, cheap micro home. I certainly would. So it'd be nice to see some of this technology used. But over to you, Anton.
Well, I think that's an excellent thought. Regarding the inflatable houses, there's also a product called the concrete canvas shelter, which you turn up with on the back of a flat top truck. You put water on it, and it kind of inflates over the course of about 24 hours and becomes a house. And it's not only a house. It's fully supplied with electricity, and you can even sterilize it and make it into a field hospital. Now, these things cost, I think, about in the region of $2,500. And then there are all kinds of other things like shipping containers, which we know have become sort of fashionable now. But at a very basic level, shipping containers have a role to play in housing people as well. And it would be really a great idea. I don't see it happening, but it would be fantastic if we could see this European Space Agency putting $1 towards Earth housing for every dollar they spend on building their little housing complex on the moon. I think that would then be fair.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I think there are a lot of solutions that we already have, for some of the problems on Earth. They just don't seem to be being implemented. And that's why I have a bit of a disdain for government, because I just don't think they're trying hard enough to sort out some of the problems.
I kind of agree with you both, but I also think that there's a lot of technologies that have already come from space, like you said, Scott, from space exploration, and these include things like all our solar technology. Like solar tech was first used on satellites that were sent up. Loads of lightweight alloys, heat-resistant surfaces, all the communications technologies. All of these were first used in space, and they had to make them very, very small, very compact, very efficient. So now we sort of see all that in our mobile phones, for example, and computer technologies. And then we've got telescopes and probes going deeper into space to give us a glimpse into the amazing complexity of the universe, and trying to answer some of the questions that has previously been left up to sort of spiritual leaders and stuff. Questions like, where did we come from, and is there a God, and how did this life start on Earth? And then there's these unique perspectives of those who've actually been into space, kind of turning around after leaving the Earth's atmosphere and seeing the Earth as a whole from outer space. The sort of poetry that came back from some of those astronauts trying to describe their feelings after experiencing that was quite kind of breathtaking, quite incredible. And many of them had these feelings of like, God, that's my home, and that's a holistic home, that this is where some of the ideas of Gaia theory, so the Earth being a unique interconnected being itself, a living being, some of these ideas of Gaia theory actually came from the astronauts themselves. So they're saying like, wow, this is something living out in space itself, and that's just from having that perspective of seeing the Earth out in space itself. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to this. I think the billions of dollars that would be spent on building a colony on the moon could be spent in amazing ways down here on Earth. But at the same time, though the stuff that actually comes out of such ventures as heading out into space and exploring our own solar system, for example, or building a colony on the moon, some of the stuff that would come out of that would be incredible. It's the stuff that kids dream of. The stuff that people see in science fiction movies and stories and so on. So I don't know. I'll leave it at that.
I kind of agree with everything you've said, Phil, and I'm certainly I'm a bit of a space geek, as I think many of us are. But I also feel that we're sort of moving into a different era in this regard, because at the time when most of the achievements you're talking about took place, it was amazing just to get anyone up there at all, and in that period, then I think you did get these wonderful things happening, so you got people looking at the Earth for the first time, and the famous photo of the Earth it's been published over and over, and giving us a kind of a new perspective on who we are and where we are. So I think the next phase was, all right, so what can we learn from this experience? And so, you had the various experiments that you've talked about that have been responsible for so much innovation. And that's obviously a positive thing. We're moving closer to a time when the questions are going to be different. The questions are going to be, all right, we can easily get somebody up here. Now, what's here and how can we exploit it? And the idea of, mining facilities on the moon and things like this has come up and been discussed seriously. And I think when that happens, then a lot of what you're talking about, unfortunately, will be a lot of the kind of the beauty of, being out in space and experiencing the cosmos and perceiving ourselves as being part of it, will be somewhat sullied by, or maybe somewhat sullied by the realities of, okay, now we've got another ball of rock that we can destroy. So I don't want to sound too much like an old curmudgeon, but I do really worry about that. I think the time is coming when those things will confront us.
This is part of the problem with where we are on Earth at the moment is the fact that most human beings only see things around them as resources, even if they're living things. We're still seeing, some people are still seeing other people, other human beings as a resource. How can we get the most efficient, how can we use these people in the most efficient and best, most profitable way possible? And it's the same with the way we see trees, the way we see plants, the way we see everything is given this kind of monetary value. And because of that, we've lost pretty much what you were saying. We've lost that beauty. We've lost that connection with other living things, with our entire planet. And hence we're in a hell of a lot of shit at the moment. We've raped our planet basically. And we need to sort of find, like you said, the questions are changing now. The most important questions perhaps now are not where we came from and so on, but how can we continue? How can we make our lives sustainable and the lives of our kids sustainable?
But continue we must. And unfortunately, we don't have an awful lot of time. So I was going to say, I actually view you two as resources of information, nothing more, and to be discarded once I finish it.
And I hope
and I will discard you.
This Thai whiskey that you had last night. So
we don't talk about the Thai whiskey last night. That's going to be edited out. rather than lead a ghostly silence now, I thought we could move on to our final story today, which is from Anthony. I believe you're going to talk about something ghost-related, but from a study point of view.
I am, yes, as I stand up again after kneeling down on one knee in front of the Segway King. Yeah, there was recently a study put out last month, survey results put out by an organization called YouGov. Are either of you guys familiar with YouGov? Do you know who these people are?
I did briefly check, and I know they're linked to Cambridge University in some way.
Yeah, they seem to be. They're based in Cambridge, and they seem to be linked to the university. They're essentially one of these polling groups who offer their results to government organizations and the public and so on. And they've got about 4 million members, and basically they send surveys to these members, I guess, to particular subsets of these members every day, and they publish daily results of what people think about a whole bunch of stuff. So they recently surveyed 51,000 people in Britain, 12,000 of whom self-identify as Christian, and the other 39,000 of whom don't. So kind of large control group. And they found out some quite striking things. One was that British people are more likely to believe in ghosts than they are to believe that the universe had a creator. They're also, by the way, more likely to believe in alien life than in a creator, and more likely to believe in karma. So there's a few other things in this survey that also kind of were quite eye-opening for me, but I wondered what you guys make of that.
Personally, I'm becoming a little bit skeptical of studies themselves, because I just think you need to know what questions have been asked. I do feel like there's a lot of bias behind studies as well. Like they choose what they're going to be studying. And so I've been thinking about how studies are biased towards what the person has decided to study. But that's aside. It doesn't really surprise me. At the same time, if people believe in ghosts, I just wondered why they would think there'd be some kind of what they think ghosts are, whether it's connected to the afterlife. If they believe in ghosts but not a sort of spiritual existence of a higher being, what do they think these ghosts are? I'd be interested to ask the questions to know about what the questions were put to them, those kind of things,
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually going to try and see if I can look them up as we're speaking. Here's one. Do you regard yourself as belonging to any particular religion, and if so, to which do you belong? That was one of the questions. So yeah, but another interesting thing to come out of this survey was the belief in alien life. It's very high in the UK, and yeah, I think that's quite interesting in itself. And belief in karma as well, because the UK is kind of the quintessential Western country almost, and karma is not a Western belief.
Yeah, but then again, I mean, that's where I think the detail is kind of important, because if you say, do you believe in karma, different people will take from that different things. One person might be from, say, somewhere like India and think of that in a totally different way to a guy on the street who thinks, yeah, I think what goes around comes around. So they think of it on a more simplistic level. So I think I believe in karma, but on the more simplistic level and I think it might be a sort of a hope that it's true, that if somebody does something bad, then they get their comeuppance, So I don't know. I think the questions mean different things to different people.
I also think I'd also kind of echo what you were saying, Scott, about the belief in ghosts and the belief in was it a belief in a creator, Anthony? A belief in God. So I mean, in one way, like if you don't believe in God, then it's most likely that you kind of reject most or if not all of any kind of religious beliefs. So there's no God, there's no afterlife, there's nothing but our material world here. And yet if you believe in ghosts, how can you just believe in your material world? There's got to be that question of like, what is a ghost exactly? And if you do believe in ghosts, there's got to be something in the back of your head kind of saying like, man, this is a weird sort of phenomenon. This is the soul of some person. And if there's a soul, there's got to be something beyond this life. There's got to be something beyond this material world. So I just found that's kind of interesting to me, is that people can believe in ghosts but not believe in I can understand that they don't believe in a God necessarily, because maybe they associate God with the Christian God or the Christian religion, and a lot of people, there seems to have been a big backlash against Christianity over the past few decades. So maybe people just sort of refuse in their minds to sort of believe in God because it has these links to Christianity. But yeah, an interesting one.
I also wanted to mention about the aliens as well. I've always found it curious. I've said this before because we've had some shows on UFOs and things like that. But and I know we've talked about. I believe that anything UFO related is really mocked in the media. It's kind of even today I was watching Fox News and they did the usual thing about just laughing or mocking or making the story a bit of a joke. It's never taken seriously, and yet most people do believe in aliens. I've always found that kind of a bit strange that everyone believes in them. But if someone said, well, I saw something weird today in the sky and it's unexplained and it wasn't military, how it's just, instead of joking about it all the time, it'd be nice just if people started taking it a bit more seriously. And
one more thing that I wanted to mention that came out of this survey, or an associated survey, and it links back to what you said, Phil, about people having a kind of an aversion to Christianity and kind of swearing off God, as because God and Christianity are linked in many people's minds. I think an unexpected finding that these guys made was that that the word Christian turns out to be, in their terms, partly a cultural term. And that means among people who self-identify as Christian, only about 55% say they believe in God, meaning that to the other 45%, being a Christian implies something else. So it could be like belonging to a particular value system or, a particular cultural background in much the same way as you might say, I'm from a Catholic family or I grew up in a Muslim country, without necessarily implying that you have any particular belief yourself. So actually, it seems that many of the people who identify as Christian take on the religion, but don't take on the belief in a creator.
That doesn't surprise me at all because this was done in England, I believe. It's described as a Christian nation, but I would, the majority of people aren't. They're just, it's just a term. They might have a Christian wedding, be married in a one of the denominations of Christianity, the church, but they have no real belief. So that doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah. So I think the picture emerges from which emerges from this in general, if we can, place any faith, so to speak, in the data, is one of a little bit of confusion. I think, what is actually going on beyond the physical. I think there's a large degree of uncertainty about that among the 50,000 people surveyed. With people kind of, as I said, registering no to God and yes to ghosts is quite strange. And saying, yes, I'm a Christian, but no, I don't believe in God. Yeah, there's quite a bit of, muddle in there, it seems to me.
I think it's also, there's one of the explanations for that is that people don't think about much else apart from our physical world at school. I think people should, philosophy and questioning where we're from and talking about the spiritual world and people's beliefs. People don't actually spend much time at all doing it, even at school. And therefore, when you ask all these questions in a survey related to these topics, people just give very quick answers, and it's not really based on any severe length of time that they've actually thought into these topics, read about them, investigated them, or contemplated them. So you get these kind of confused answers.
I also think that to an extent that's where organized religion steps in. It's I think it's natural to kind of wonder about these things at a certain point in your life, or not only one point in your life. But I think for many people there are other things to be getting on with, which kind of trump the question of, all right, well, is there a God or whatever? And organized religion can step in and say, well, look, here's the God. Here's what the God said. Here's what you should do on Friday. Here's what you shouldn't do on Sunday. Follow all of these rules and everything will be fine. And some people, I think, just go, great, sorted. Let's get on with, like feeding my family or whatever. And I think that there's something to be said for that, but there's also something to be said against it.
Yeah, but that you're talking about institutionalized religion and hierarchies.
I am.
I was more thinking of like just the question of okay, where did we come from, and if you're going to talk about God, what is God, and
Yeah. No,
rather than
that
following the Catholic traditions and rituals or other religions, following the rituals and hierarchy of that religion, which are clearly man-made.
But that's why
yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Well,
they
that's
were so popular in the past, these religions, because it meant people didn't have to think about those things too much because they never came up with any answers. It was so difficult to actually contemplate what life is all about and where they are in life and where they have to go and what they have to do. So it was so much easier for people to just hand over responsibility to someone else, which is the big danger, and which led to so many problems, slavery for one. And yet nowadays people are so, in a way, Scott, I think it was you, Anthony, saying just now, people have so many other things to think about. They do, but we're also still bombarded by all these different things. This is going back to a conversation we had at the beginning of this program. We're bombarded by so many different things, so many different images and sounds and sights and experiences and so on. It's difficult to actually have the time to think seriously into some of these deep questions. But the main thing I was going to say was, when it comes to beliefs, I think a lot of us don't really know exactly what we believe. Because you'll find a lot of people will say they don't believe in God, they're not religious in any way at all, but as soon as something very, very dire happens in their life, like a loved one in hospital, some accident happens, or they have a disease or something, one of the first things that a lot of people do is go and pray. And sort of say in their prayer, like, I've never prayed before and I'm really sorry about that, but God, please, can you help me here? Because there's something in the back of their heads that is still sort of saying to them, there's something beyond this world. There's something more than the material world that we see before us. And so it brings out this belief that before they were unconscious of. So I think a lot of our beliefs are actually like that we have these beliefs that are kind of, we think we should believe in this or we shouldn't believe in that. But when it comes down to it, we just need a few triggers to happen in the outside world, something to just trigger us or push our buttons in some way. And suddenly we're doing the exact thing that we said before we don't believe in doing. We don't believe that's the right thing to do in this situation. We don't believe that's the right way to behave in this situation. So I think a lot of the beliefs we have are kind of hidden in our subconscious mind, and they come out, in odd times during our lifetime, and we just, it's difficult to know exactly how we believe, what we believe about in this life.
Very true. You find out a lot about people when they're in severely traumatic situations or are down on their luck. And unfortunately, we're down on our luck a bit, or at least we're down on time because we've run out of time today. But we can continue talking about these issues and more, and perhaps talk about more spiritual topics in upcoming episodes. But I wanted to thank you both for coming on today.
Good to be on here again. See you next time, Scott, and see you, Anthony.
See you soon. It was a pleasure as always.
It's a great pleasure, I'd have to say. And just a quick shout out to listeners at Dark Matter Digital Network, and also Deep Talk Radio and Enchilada Radio and Alien Dreams. Thank you all for listening, and also to people on YouTube. And we'll catch you again later. Goodbye. Thanks for listening to today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you think about some of the topics we've discussed today. You can find us at truthsentinel.co.uk. That's www.truthsentinel.co.uk. And as I mentioned before, there's a chat room there and a voicemail system. You can also buy political t-shirts there from trutht-shirts.com. You'll find the details on the website. It's not our company, but if you buy a t-shirt from them and use the code TRUTH1, you get a 10% discount and we get a small donation. You can also donate to us at the bottom there. All helps us to buy new equipment so we can record the show. And in the meantime, just thank you very much for listening to us today, and I hope you have a very good week. Goodbye.